Today I'm going to be ranking the albums by Dream Theater. I will include the new one called Parasomnia, and I'm doing this because it's time for an update. I did a ranking which was 4 years ago when their previous album was released. I was able to listen to all the albums again last week, and I'm going to be doing it a little differently. I'll be doing it in chronological order. It's kind of that hybrid tier list I've done in previous videos, so I thought it would be good to do it this way. I have 16 albums, so let me get started. The first album I have is called When Dream and Day Unite. This was released on March 6th, 1989. This is their debut album and the only album without James LaBrie on vocals, as it has Charlie Dominici as the lead vocalist. This also has Kevin Moore on keyboards, and he will be playing on the next few albums. I think this album is not too bad. I felt it was more of a progressive rock album, but with metal influences. I thought it was more along the lines of Fate's Warning. There are still a lot of songs I like. The opening track is a very proggy song, but also has some heavier guitar riffs. And I felt it was more of a keyboard-oriented song. Charlie Dominici's vocals sound good, but they reminded me more of the singer for Fate's Warning. Some songs are more commercial sounding, such as the track Status Seeker, that sounded more like a progressive rock band that made an album in the 80s. There are also a lot of songs that reminded me of the band Rush, such as the track YTSE Jam. They also have some softer songs, such as the track The Killing Hand, which was another one that reminded me of Rush in the 80s. And I like the track called Afterlife that was a little heavier and had more of a metal feel with faster rhythms and more aggressive drumming. Overall, it's not too bad. It's showing the band when they're just starting out, and this one comes in at number 12. Next is Images and Words. This was released on July 7th, 1992. This is the first album with James LaBrie, and he will stay with the band throughout the rest of their career. This is their breakout album. It had the hit Pull Me Under. I remember when this song came out, I remember Pull Me Under was played on the radio all the time. I used to listen to alternative rock radio. And I think the song Pull Me Under has held up pretty well. I enjoy listening to it. Some people might think it's overrated, but I think it's a really good song. And this album in general, I think a lot of people think it's one of their best, but for me, it's a little overrated. I would say there are a couple songs that bring it down. For example, Another Day that comes right after it. It's okay. Take the Time, which is good, but not really that heavy. And another ballad called Surrounded, which is just okay, followed by Metropolis Part 1, which is one of the best songs on the album. And they actually made a whole concept album about that song years later. And then the song Under a Glass Moon is not too bad. I don't mind listening to it. And then Wait for Sleep is kind of like a Nightwish song, which is okay. And then the final track, Learning to Live, is a really good song. It shows off their prog rock side. So overall, it's a good album. But I know some people might have this at number 1. Some people might have it really high. I have it in the front half, so I'm putting it at number 6. Next is Awake. This was released on October 4th, 1994, and this is the last album with Kevin Moore. I like this one a lot. It was more of a metal album. This was my number 1 album the last time I did a ranking, but I listened to it again, and it dropped a little bit. But it's not going to be number 1, but it's not going to be that high on the list or that low. But it has some good stuff. It has 6 o'clock in the morning. That one has James LaBrie's vocals, and I like that one. He sounds angrier. And it has some progginess as well. Then there's Caught in a Web, which is one of my favorite songs. It shows off their heavy side and their progressive rock side. And James still has some of his angrier vocals on that one. And a ballad called Innocence Faded, which is actually pretty good. It kind of sounds like 80s arena rock. And one of their best songs, Erotomania, which has that cool Deep Purple style keyboards. And then Voices, which is a good song, very representative of the sound of the album. And another ballad called The Silent Man. And this is something the band doesn't do often. It's a stripped down acoustic song. It doesn't have lots of bells and whistles and all that stuff. I usually don't like their ballads, but I like this one a lot because it's kind of simple. And then after this is The Mirror, which is one of their heaviest songs up to that point, and that's an awesome song. And then there's Lie. I like that one a lot. It's very heavy, progressive rock. And the next 3 songs are good, but might bring down the album a little bit. But the last song, Space Divest, is really cool. That's another one of my favorites. It has this Pink Floyd type of vibe. This one, it's not going to be my number 1, but I have it at number 3. The next album I have is Falling into Infinity. This was released on September 23rd, 1997, and this is the only album with Derek Sherinian on keyboards, and he replaced Kevin Moore after he left in 1994. This is a more commercial-friendly album. They were pressured by the record company because the previous album, Awake, didn't sell as well as Images and Words, so they were kind of pressured to make it a little more accessible. But with that being said, it's not a really bad album. It has some stuff I like, so let's talk about it. Opening track, New Millennium's not too bad. It sounded like more of a progressive rock type of song. Unite Me is a very catchy song, has a very memorable chorus. Peruvian Skies is one of their softer songs, although it picks up later in the song, and that reminded me of something like Robin Trower's Bridge of Sighs. It's not too bad. And there's another ballad called Hollow Years. That one's just okay, but I like the guitar playing on it. They get a little heavy on the track Burning My Soul, but otherwise not one of the more memorable tracks in the album. And there's a really cool instrumental called Hell's Kitchen that has a very psychedelic and trippy sound, similar to Pink Floyd. Then there's the song Take Away My Pain, a very commercial sounding song. It's very catchy, but I like it. Overall, it's not too bad, but there are a lot of better ones. This one comes in at number 10. Next is Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. This was released on October 26, 1999. This is the first concept album which takes place after a song that was on Images and Words, and also the first album with Jordan Rudess on keyboards, and he's going to stay in the band. So the band is going for more of a traditional progressive rock sound. They said they were influenced by other concept albums by classic rock bands such as Genesis' The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Radiohead's OK Computer, Pink Floyd The Wall, amongst others. The album is divided into scenes, and every song is a different scene. So scene 1 is mostly a skit, but has some acoustic guitars and singing. Scene 2, Overture in 1928, had more of the classic sound with lots of progressive rock-style keyboards and complex arrangements. Scene 3, Through My Words, was one of their ballads, which is not too bad. One of the best songs in the middle. And I like scene 4 because the intro kind of sounds like Nirvana. I like that. It's kind of like has these faster rhythms. And another song, Through Her Eyes, is another one I like. It's a softer song. I think my favorites come towards the middle, which is scene 6, Home, which has a lot of everything, has the progressive elements, the heavier elements, and it reminds me of a Pink Floyd The Wall type of song. And the same can be said for scene 8, which is a very Roger Waters type of song. I ranked this one pretty high last time, but I think it dropped a little bit. It has a lot of ballads, but it's still a good album. This one comes in at number 7. The next album is 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, and this is a double album released on January 29th, 2002. The album has 2 discs, so it's a long album. The first disc has 5 tracks featuring The Glass Prison, which is in 3 parts, and disc 2 has 1 song divided into 8 parts called 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, which has a total length of 42 minutes. The album's not too bad, but it's very long, so there are a lot of times I feel kind of bored listening to it from front to back. The Glass Prison is a good song and has some heavy riffs and faster drum beats, but also has more of a melodic and progressive rock sound. There's the track Blind Faith, which has more of a laid-back sound at first, but also some heavy moments. There's a ballad called Misunderstood. I like it one a lot. Almost has this psychedelic Beatles type of sound, so that's one of my favorites. The Great Debate is pretty good. It has lots of complex arrangements and this overall futuristic sound. Then another ballad called Disappear, which is not too bad, has some of those psychedelic sounds. As for the next disc, it has its moments. My favorite parts are Act 3, War Inside My Head, and Act 4, The Test That Stumped Them All. But this side gets brought down by the 70s soft rock of Goodnight Kiss and the adult contemporary of Solitary Shell, but overall, not too bad. This one comes in a little towards the bottom, so it comes in at number 11. Next is Train of Thought. It was released on November 11, 2003. This is kind of a transitional album for them because it's when they become more of a metal band while still retaining their progressive rock sound. And they did this because when they played their live shows a lot, fans liked the heavier songs, so they decided to release a heavier album. I really like the opening track, As I Am. It has this really sludgy guitar riff, and I've always liked it. There's This Dying Soul. It has some of the best drumming by Mike Portnoy and some pretty cool machine gun style guitar riffs. There's a ballad, Endless Sacrifice, but it's unlike a typical Dream Theater ballad because it's more of a darker sounding song. There's a track on Thy Father, which not only has some awesome guitars, also has some pretty cool bass guitar playing. There's the song Vacant, which is another slower song. It's also a very sad song. It's about James LaBrie's daughter who had a seizure before her 7th birthday. But apparently she's fine. But after this is the 11-minute instrumental, Stream of Consciousness, which is probably their best instrumental. And this album closes with In the Name of God, a 14-minute track, which basically shows everything this band knows how to do. It gets heavy, it gets progressive, it gets lighter, all wrapped up into one song. Now, this might be a controversial take, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's what I want to do. This one is going in at number 1. Next is Octavarium, released on June 7, 2005. This is also the last album released on Atlantic Records. I like this album. I think it's a very balanced album. It has some heavy stuff. It has some progressive stuff. I like the opening track, The Root of All Evil. It has a nice balance between the heaviness and progressive elements. After this is The Answer Lies Within. It's a ballad. I think it brings the album down a little bit. Then there are These Walls, which really shows out their progressive rock side and some really awesome keyboard playing by Jordan Rudess. There's a song I Walk Beside You, which is another progressive rock song, but also has that commercial appeal. In other words, it's a very catchy song with a memorable chorus. And this album also has one of my favorite Dream Theater songs called Panic Attack. One of the songs has awesome bass guitar work. It's a very heavy song. And then another song, Never Enough, which is basically Dream Theater trying to sound like the band Muse, but I think they pulled it off, and I like it a lot. There is Sacrifice Sons, another laid-back ballad, but it has this jazzy sound, and it's a little darker, and the lyrics are about people who died in 9/11, so I think it's a really good song. They end the album with a title track called Octavarium, which is 24 minutes. I like the song. I think they make good use of the entire runtime because they pack so many different styles and changes and transitions. And this is a near perfect album. It just has a few weak spots to keep it out of the number 1 spot, but I like it, and I'm actually ranking it higher than I did last time. This one is coming in at number 2. After this is Systematic Chaos, released on June 4th, 2007. This is the first album released on Roadrunner. The opening track is called In the Presence of Enemies, Part 1. It's a really good album opener, has a nice balance between heavy metal and progressive rock. Then there's the track Forsaken, which is another one with some awesome heavy metal style guitar riffs. There's Constant Motion, and this is Dream Theater trying to play thrash metal. You can hear a Metallica influence on this track. Then there's the track Dark Eternal Night, which is pretty much the definition of progressive metal because it has the two styles blended together perfectly. Then there's the ballad called Repentance, and it's more of a dark and trippy type of song. So I think it makes a pretty good track. And then there's the track Prophets of War, another one where they're trying to sound like the band Muse, and maybe a little bit of Queen mixed in, but still has heavy moments. Then there's the track Ministry of Lost Souls, a very big and epic track. I hear influences from King Crimson, and it has lots of epic moments. The last song, In the Presence of Enemies 2, is where they kind of did this Pink Floyd Shine on You Crazy Diamond type of thing, where they have parts 1 and 2, but split on different parts of the album. And this is another album that grew on me a lot. I think I had it ranked a little lower the first time, but since I've been listening to it, I like it a lot more. And this one is coming in at number 4. Next is Black Clouds and Silver Linings, released on June 23rd, 2009 through Roadrunner. This is the last album with Mike Portnoy until Parasomnia in 2025. The opening track is A Nightmare to Remember, and this track lets you know that this will be a darker album. It almost has this atmospheric black metal sound, especially in the drumming, and there's some killer guitar riffs. Then there was A Rite of Passage, and this is like if Metallica played Middle Eastern guitar riffs, and also a darker song with James LaBrie doing some lower range vocals. Then there's Wither, which is a ballad, but also kind of had a grunge sound. The beginning reminds me of Bush in the beginning, one of their songs, and it's a catchy song. Then there is The Shattered Fortress, another track that shows up the heavy side as well as the progressive rock side. After this is The Best of Times. This is another ballad that was written as a tribute to Mike Portnoy's father, who passed away a year before this album came out. And the closing track is The Count of Tuscany, which has always been one of my favorites of their longer songs. It's one of those songs that has a little bit of everything. It has the slower parts, the heavier parts, and it's just one of my favorites. This is an album I've always liked, and this one is coming in at number 5. After this is A Dramatic Turn of Events. This was released on September 12th, 2011. This is the first album with Mike Mangini on drums until their 2021 album, A View from the Top. And this one opens with On the Backs of Angels. This is the band taking a step back. It's less heavy, it's more of a progressive rock album. But it's a good song. So after this, they have Build Me Up, Break Me Down. This one has some pretty cool guitar riffs, but they're not as heavy as the previous albums. It had more of an electronic sound. Then there was Lost Not Forgotten. This one's not too bad. It has a few heavy moments, but more of a progressive rock song. After this is the Life, and more of a laid-back song. It's just okay. And then there have Bridges in the Sky, which is a weird song. They do some Mongolian throat singing in the intro, but has some heavier riffs, so not too bad. Then there's Outcry, which is more of that progressive rock, but has a big and epic sound. And then Far From Heaven is another ballad. It's kind of forgettable. And then Breaking All Illusions, which is one of the better songs, has more of their 90s sound. The closing track is Beneath the Surface. This is also kind of a laid-back song. Overall, one of the weaker albums, not their worst, but it's towards the bottom, and this one comes in at number 14. After this is the self-titled, released on September 23rd, 2013 through Roadrunner Records. This is another transitional album for the band. They had shorter songs, with the exception of the last track, and they're going for more of a progressive rock sound with elements of heavy metal. The album opens with False Awakening Suite, which is just an instrumental. It sounds like something you would hear in a Star Wars movie or something like that. Then there is The Enemy Inside, which is one of the heaviest songs in the album, and the song also has complex progressive rock arrangements. Then there's a song called The Looking Glass, which sounds a lot like early 80s Rush. And then after this is Enigma Machine, which is more of a dark and haunting song. The guitar riff kind of reminds me of that Inspector Gadget theme song. But the best part is towards the end when Mike Mangini does these awesome drum solo. Then there's The Bigger Picture, which is pretty representative of the progressive rock sound. There's a song, Surrender to Reason, which also has some of those 80s Rush influences. But overall, the album is not too bad, but not one I'm going to rank very high. This one comes in at number 15. Next is The Astonishing, released on January 29, 2016. This is the band's second concept album. It's a story. It takes place in the future about this dystopian society, and I'm not going to get into the whole story. There's a lot going on. It's a long album. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes long. I've always found this album to be very long and very boring, but for the purposes of this ranking, I decided to give it another listen. It took me 2 days to listen to the whole thing because I listened to one half one day and then the second half the next day. I never liked the album, but I listened to it again and I still don't like it, but I dislike it slightly less than before, if that makes any sense. I think it's the type of album you want to listen to with headphones and just read the lyrics while you're listening to it and just follow the story. So I think it might work in that way, but it's not the type of album to put on when you just want to like do stuff and have it on in the background, because then it's just very boring. There are 34 tracks, so one of those albums that has lots of short songs, interludes, skits, sound effects, all that stuff. There's a party album that's not really bad. I think around tracks 25 to 30, there are a few songs I like. For example, The Path That Divides is track 25. That one has its moments. Tracks 27, The Walking Shadow is not that bad. Kind of has some climactic moments, but otherwise, still coming in last. This one comes in at number 16. Next is Distance Over Time, released on February 22nd, 2019 on the Inside Out label. This is one of their shorter albums. It's under an hour long. I remember when this one came out. I remember I liked it a lot when it came out, but upon listening to it again, I think it dropped down a few spots. But it's one of those albums that has a few songs I like a lot and others that are kind of forgettable. So with this album, it opens with Untethered Angel, which is a good song. I remember when that one came out. It's a little darker. And then the song Paralyzed, another one I remember when it came out. It's a little heavier, but also shows off their progressive rock side. Then the song Fall Into the Light is another one. I could say the same thing. A nice balance of prog and metal. And the next two songs were pretty cool. Barstool Warrior and Room 137. Both had some pretty cool guitar riffs by John Petrucci. And track S2N, which is just okay. Then the track At Wit's End, which is another one, just okay. but very representative of their sound. It's kind of prog and metal mixed together. But I think my favorite song on the album is Pale Blue Dot. And this one has a little bit of everything. It has heavy sections. It has parts where they're playing really fast. So it's a good song. But this one dropped a little. Just, I like the other ones better. But this one is coming in at number 13. Next is A View from the Top of the World, released on October 22nd, 2021. This is the last album with Mike Mangini, and he left in October 2023, and that's when Mike Portnoy came back. And he's going to be on the next album, Parasomnia, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I reviewed this on my channel. I liked it a lot when it came out, and it's one of the better albums from their more recent albums. So the opening track, The Alien, is just a very fast and heavy track. Lots of complex compositions and arrangements. It's a 9-minute song, but it just doesn't feel long. After this is Answering the Call. This one has a heavy sound, but also spacey and futuristic sounding keyboards. So it's a nice balance between heavy and progressive. After this is Invisible Monster, and this one is one of the laid-back tracks. Has a darker tone. It's catchy, and I think Mike Mangini plays some pretty good drums on it. Then there's Sleeping Giant. It's one of the best songs. It has different arrangements, heavy parts, and lots of different stuff. Transcending Time is one of the ballads, which is not too bad. This is another one where I hear that 80s Rush influence. Then there's Awaken the Master, another one of their best songs, lots of complex guitar riffs and spacey keyboards, and cool melodic lead guitar work, plus heavy riffs. So the final song is the title track. It's a 20-minute song, but another one, it just doesn't feel long, and it's just has a little bit of everything. But before I rank this, let me talk about Parasomnia real quick. So last album, Parasomnia, released February 7, 2025, the band's first studio album with Mike Portnoy since Black Clouds and Silver Linings, and also a concept album, not really a story, but more of a thematic concept album about parasomnia, which is a sleep disorder. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this. I did a full review. I'm going to link it to the end screen, but one of the darkest albums, one of the best albums. It's a great album. It's comparable to the previous album, A View from the Top of the World. So I have them both really close. So as you can see on the screen, I have number 8 and 9 as the last two rankings left. So to end off this ranking, I'm going to put A View from the Top of the World at number 9, and I'm going to put Parasomnia at number 8. Okay, so that's all. I didn't speak a lot about Parasomnia, but I did a full review of it, so I'm going to stick that right here. You can watch that video next. I go into all the details, track by track, and I dissect everything. So you can watch my review of Parasomnia if you haven't watched it yet. In the meantime, give the video a like, check and subscribe, and all that good stuff. If you're new to this channel, I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. So I'll see you in the next one.